Just got off the plane, so this is going to be a little bit of a different live stream. We are going to be actually streaming the reaction to the Sunday games rather than making a full-blown video for y'all, but hopefully we are able to have some fun, talk about it. And honestly, I'm having myself one hell of a day. We all save the matchup for myself this week in the Flock League to the Flock League YouTube channel. Y'all can see what happened on Tuesday. But let's go ahead. Let's go game by game here and see what we may end up needing to update with the rest of season rankings and with general takes on players. So first thing is obviously diving into the Los Angeles Chargers game. Previously, I viewed Justin Herbert and Kirk Cousins both as quarterbacks that you really only view as streaming options if they have great matchups. We've talked about the limited passing volume in Los Angeles and also the lack of rushing upside with both these QBs. And yeah, I don't think we have to change anything here. I still think that Herbert, Cousins, only interesting streamers if they have a phenomenal matchup. Going over to what we have with the running backs, specifically in Los Angeles, you really don't have anything here for any player. I mean, Hassan Haskins loses a fumble. This guy may never touch the ball ever again. Vidal, Edwards, pseudo split the backfield. The issue again with Gus Edwards, and why I didn't think it was a super interesting waiver wire pickup this past week, is you're not really going to have much usage as a receiver. So really, I don't think either of these running backs will be super, super interesting outside of the instance where, of course, we get J.K. Dobbins back in, you get Dobbins back in. Then at that point, you do you. You can be freaking pumped, but that's not the case right now. Now, going over to the receivers in Los Angeles, you are looking at Ladd McConkey and Joshua Palmer. And you know what? I'm a better live streamer than this. I can figure out how to make this better for y'all. Can I or can I not? You know what? We can figure this out together. I believe I hold Option. We go here and bam. It's bigger now. I don't know. Bigger doesn't always mean better. At least that's what I tell myself. But at least maybe it's a little bit easier to see. Anyway, Ladd McConkey continues to see absolutely everything here. Now, for me, selfishly, I'm kind of hoping that for my best ball teams, maybe Quentin Johnston does something. But nope, Quentin Johnston's a bum. Ladd McConkey takes 117 receiving yards out of the 147 passing yards for Justin Herbert. So Ladd does look like he is an absolute must-start wide receiver every single week. I traded Sal Ladd for DK Metcalf a few weeks back. Also, I got Najee. We'll talk about Najee in a bit, but honestly, absolutely hate that. Looks like Ladd is legitimately a league winner as long as we have the passing volume in Los Angeles. Tight end, I know a lot of people are upset with us for quote-unquote being too low on Will Dissly. Again, the issue is the lack of overall passing volume in this offense. Now, going over to the Atlanta Falcons side of things, you have Kirk Cousins with the absolute blow-up here. And I don't want to say blow up in a good way. Implosion. Whatever the hell you want to say for Cousins to have 4 interceptions. And you've kind of seen this consistently with Kirk Cousins, not only this season, but this has been the MO for Cousins through his entire NFL career. If he has a great matchup, he is going to maybe go out there and throw the ball for 500 passing yards. If he has a matchup against a pretty tough defense, he is going to be horrendous. Now, of course, there's enough volume in this offense where even in a horrible real-life day where Cousins throws 4 interceptions, you can still get players as viable options. Bijan Robinson cements himself still as the absolute bell cow back. I mean, you have a total of 32 opportunities in this backfield for Bijan. Comes through 25 points in a tough matchup. Algier is still just a premium handcuff. Nothing really changes here. London has 16 targets. 16 targets, obviously, bad day from Cousins, so London's not going to go out there and give you a 30 bomb, but I mean, Drake London definitely does look like an absolute must-start wide receiver every week into the future. I'm going through and looking at what we have with Ray McLeod. Not interesting at all. For the love of God, don't pick him up. And then Darnell Mooney, I had him previously just as that flex play depending on matchup. You're going to see the big spike when Cousins has a good day. You're going to see, I mean, a really big letdown when Cousins disappoints. You look and just consistently, he has about 20 to 25% of the receiving yards in this offense. And yeah, I mean, Mooney doesn't do anything special for you. Going down to what we have with tight ends, Kyle Pitts with the goose egg. You can see Kyle Pitts does not have a team name over him. And the reason being is going through and looking at the Flock League. We actually had, where is it? Danny dropped Kyle Pitts after the 0-point game. And honestly, if I were you, I wouldn't fault you at all for dropping Kyle Pitts. It's very hard to say that Kyle Pitts is anything more than just a streaming tight end at this point. I mean, it is just an absolute brutal spot. Brutal. But let's go over and let's actually look at an exciting game. Let's look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and Cincinnati Bengals. Your boy was stressed in this one. It was a big one for us. We were starting both Najee Harris and Jamar Chase. But anyway, Russ goes nuclear. Russ has over 400 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. I mean, again, the issue that you're going to have with Russell Wilson is, frankly, you just have absolutely no rushing upside. So do I change my mind here with Russ and go, oh my gosh, Russ is now a must-start quarterback every single week? No. But do we view Russell Wilson as a quarterback that you can play in great matchups? Yes. And this does cement as well that the Cincinnati Bengals are probably the softest defense you can go up against as an opposing quarterback, or honestly, an opposing running back. You want to play your options against the Bengals here very, very easily. Now, going over and looking at what we have with running back, we have Najee with a total of 22 opportunities. Najee gets banged up earlier. It gives me a scare. Najee was cruising down the field. I mean, I actually had to play against George Pickens today. Najee looked phenomenal in like the second or third drive. I can't remember what it was. This was the game I was really watching early in the day just because I had so many players in my own matchup in it. But yeah, Najee gets banged up a little bit. You see a little Warren, you see Patterson. Najee's good to go. Najee does still remain in a running back by committee. Again, I don't want to take too much away from the breakdown with the opportunities, but you do have 7 opportunities for Jaylen Warren. You have a total of 6 opportunities for Cordell Patterson. So 13 opportunities to non-Najee Harris running backs in comparison to 22 for Najee. But again, I think Najee is definitely a play in great matchups. You got to go ahead and jam him in. And bad matchups, not excited. I'm going over to wide receiver. Actually, I am so thankful, so lucky that in a game where you have 414 passing yards for Russell Wilson, George Pickens only comes through with the 74 receiving yards. Really surprising to see this breakdown from a market share perspective. What ends up happening is you actually have a lot of the tight ends with production. Pat Freiermuth has himself a day. And then obviously you had a bunch of receiving volume for the running backs as well. I mean, the running backs combined for almost 150 receiving yards. And you have the tight ends combining for about, a 99 total yards as well. So all this Russ volume really didn't get funneled through the receivers. Calvin Austin comes through with it. It doesn't freaking matter. The only guy you would consider starting here is George Pickens. Pickens remains a must-start option. Freiermuth, it just remains a streaming play. I'm not super excited about Freiermuth. And Chris Boswell, as a side note, continues to crush. So do the Steelers DST. The Steelers DST gave up 38 points against the Bengals today. But they had a pick, 4 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, and a touchdown. So shout out Boswell and the Pittsburgh defense. Now going over and looking at what we have with the Burrow side of things. Burrow does lose a couple fumbles, but honestly, Burrow still remains must-start quarterback every single week. It was a tough matchup against Pittsburgh. He still gives you the 20 points. Burrow 100% a tier ahead of the rest of the streaming quarterbacks. Going over to running back, Chase Brown, I'm locking in as a top 6-ish running back in our rest of season rankings. I know that sounds aggressive when you just see 19 fantasy points, but more importantly, what I see is I see a running back with 15 opportunities when the rest of the backfield has a total of 1. So Chase Brown coming out of the bye week continues to have an absolute bell cow workload. Going over to the receivers, Jamar Chase was the wide receiver 1 in his own tier before this. He remains it after this. T. Higgins was a must-start wide receiver. Believe we had him ranked at wide receiver 10 or wide receiver 12 in the rest of season rankings this week. So, I don't know. Higgins remains a must-start option. Yoshi Vosh gets a touchdown, but again, you only have 3 receivers touching the ball here. They are funneling still volume to the tight ends, but not necessarily looking at Gesicki as a super interesting play, because Gesicki has 5 total targets in a tight end room that comes away with a total of 11 of them. So Gesicki has fewer than 50% of the opportunities at tight end in this offense, so not super interested. But let's go through and let's look at what we have with the Texans Jags. I am throwing in the towel. I am willing to say, if you have CJ Stroud, freaking drop CJ Stroud. This dude's a bum in fantasy. Obviously, I'm just speaking fantasy football terms. But you come out in what should be a great matchup. You have no excuse about not having Nico at this point. And CJ Stroud is yet to, when's the last time we had over 20 fantasy points for Stroud? 14 points in week 13, 17 in week 12, 11 and a half in week 10, 11 in week 10. I'm sorry, 11 in week 9, 12 in week 8, 5 in week 7, 19 in week 6, 16 in week 5. You have one game with over 20 fantasy points for CJ Stroud so far this season. CJ Stroud is currently rostered in 92% of leagues on Sleeper. And honestly, if you had CJ Stroud, you have the bye week in week 14. This guy's not good enough to hold through the bye. You play Miami and KC in weeks 15 16. It's not like I'm dying to go through and start him in the first 2 weeks of the... There's no way you're starting CJ Stroud at this point. Like, I'd rather drop him and pick up A-Rich. Going over to what we have at the running back position, Joe Mixon remains a 3-down bell cow. Must-start guy every single week. Nothing changes. Nico Collins, you get the 19-point game, over 100 receiving yards. Remains a top 5 wide receiver rest of season. Nothing changes. Tank Dell, absolute bum here, where you're coming away with the 3.5 fantasy points in a prime matchup. I mean, it's crazy to look at the target distribution in this offense, particularly at wide receiver here for the Houston Texans, where you have 11 targets going the direction of Nico, but then all other receivers in this offense combined for 7. So you have 18 total targets going to wide receivers. Tank Dell sees 4 of them. But frankly, if you're looking at Tank Dell, this is a receiver that has given you 0 games with over 20 fantasy points this year. I mean, obviously, y'all know I've been a Tank Dell hater for quite some time, so it actually helps my teams a bunch this year that Tank Dell's disappointing. I wish we still had Diggs in this offense. It would be so much more exciting. Going over to tight end, Dalton Schultz has himself a day. Should you go through and grab Dalton Schultz, jam him in? No. The only guys that are startable in this offense at this point, which I was super excited about the Texans coming into the season. I thought Houston was going to be great. The only guys that are startable are Nico and Mixon. That's it. And a couple things. One, I know the camera is slanted and the camera looks very weird in this live stream. Shout out American Airlines. Thanks for losing my bag. I really appreciate it. Now we don't have a tripod, so we have the camera set up on the most janky thing ever. 2, I'm not a Yankees fan, but the only thing that I got in New York was this Yankees hat at Central Park. Bought it $8 from a vendor. I was like, oh, looks pretty good. Well, we'll get a little souvenir. But going over to what we have with Jacksonville, nasty hit on Lawrence. Obviously, Lawrence starts the game, leaves with a concussion. At this point, the Jags are 2-10. For the love of God, do not start Lawrence another game here. Going over to the running backs, who cares? This offense is done. Etienne, Bigsby, somewhat split in the role. Etienne has the majority of it. I mean, Etienne at this point has not had a game with double-digit fantasy points since week 5. He's not had a single game all season with 15 or more points. You're never starting Etienne. Going over to the receivers, Parker Washington comes through with the 12 targets. Obviously, there's nobody left in this offense with the injuries to Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk. Can I come out and tell you, oh yeah, Parker Washington, great waiver wire pick? No. Brian Thomas is the wide receiver 1. It's one of the worst offenses in the league with no Lawrence. So the only startable players in Jacksonville are Brian Thomas, Evan Ingram, And the only way that I would be excited to start either one is if Lawrence plays this next week. But honestly, not looking super, super likely. Now let's go over and let's look at what we have with Arizona, Minnesota. So I have been just saying F it with Kyler Murray. You have the rushing upside. Have to start Kyler, have to start Kyler, have to start Kyler. Mediocre game in a matchup where he has to throw the ball a ton. You get 45 pass attempts for Kyler. I mean, over 50 total dropbacks for Kyler Murray. But yet another game with fewer than 20 fantasy points. You have a decent matchup going up against Seattle here in week 14. I mean, this should be it's interesting how they're doing these divisional games where like every team's playing itself over again like 2 weeks later. Second time you're playing Seattle. The first time he didn't really run the ball much, so you didn't get much rushing ups. I still think Kyler's a tier ahead of the streaming quarterbacks, but obviously not close to the range that we have with the true elite players. I started James Conner yet again. I'm still going to keep on starting this guy every single week. Big thing is with Arizona and James Conner, you look at the fantasy football playoff schedule. You get New England, Carolina, and Los Angeles. So you actually have a really good stretch of games here for the fantasy football playoffs. For James Conner in particular, looking at the actual usage, you have a total of 21 opportunities for Conner in this backfield in comparison to 4 for Dermicado, in comparison to 3 for Benson. So yeah, James Conner remains 3-down running back that you start every single week. This was a tough matchup. And then obviously Trey Benson is really only what you have. I mean, only a premium handcuff. That's it. I mean, but even if James Conner were to go down, can we say that Trey Benson's for sure someone you're starting at? Probably not. Going over to the receivers, they told us early today that Harrison was going to be, I mean, really the center of their game plan. And he does tie with Trey McBride in targets with 12. Of only 5 receptions for 60 receiving yards, but you get the receiving touchdown. Obviously, the expectation, always is for the rookie wide receiver to continue to expand his role and to continue to improve as the year goes on. And if you're looking at Harrison, it's very much just boom, bust, boom, bust, boom, bust. You look over the past 6 weeks, you get 5 points, then 23 points, then 3 points, then 16 points, then 7 points, then 17 points. So can we say, oh, Harrison's finally turned the corner in a game where Kyler Murray had over 50 dropbacks? No, probably not. Probably still just a low-end wide receiver too. Michael Wilson not interested. Greg Dortch not interested. Doesn't matter. Trey McBride remains, at this point, probably tight end 2 rest of season with how the Niners look. I think you have to put him ahead of Kittle. So really it's only McBride and Bowers going at each other. And again, I do want to reiterate, since we were in New York this week, I actually did not get a chance to watch the Raiders game on Friday. So apologize for that. But I can say probably based off just what you had on Twitter in the box score. Brock Bowers is tight end 1. Now going over to what we have with the Vikings, super quiet 10-2 team here. Like everybody panicking about a couple losses with Darnold with bad turnovers. They're freaking 10-2. Obviously, Darnold's not really going to run the ball much. I'm not viewing Darnold anything more as a weekly streamer based off matchup. Aaron Jones, super interesting to see. We only get 5 carries. Like, just not a lot of volume in this offense at all. Aaron Jones, you get a total of 9 opportunities, 4 for Cam Akers, 2 for Chandler. Thank God that Jones saves the day with the receiving touchdown, loses a fumble. Going over to the receivers, obviously Jefferson remains a wide receiver 1. There's not much that changes. Addison remains a borderline flex play based off matchup. Really, the main thing is monitor the usage of Aaron Jones with the fumbles. Going over to tight end, I was really excited about TJ Hawkinson this week, given the positive trends that you had with his snap rate. Like if you go through and if you look at this, he actually, the first 3 weeks, had only played anywhere from 45 to 48% of the snaps in this offense. Hawkinson in week 12 jumped up to 68% of the snaps. I'm actually very interested to see what it was in week 13. But to be completely honest with you, I just simply don't know. Like I said, I got off the flight, came straight here, set up this little rinky-dink streaming thing. And yeah, I have not had a chance to dive into the actual snap numbers, which we will be doing all night tonight, and we will be updating our rest of season rankings on the site. But really the main conversation is with Hawkinson is, are you going to put Hawkinson or David Njoku there at like tight end 5, tight end 6? Because I still think Hawkinson's probably a must-start tight end rest of season. And speaking of David Njoku, seamless transition here. Let's see how we can... Is this working? Can y'all see this? You can check out a David Njoku pick'em over there on Underdog Fantasy. Oh, y'all can see my stream setup. Hide my camera. Bam. If y'all wanted to check out any of these picks, obviously they are on Underdog. Y'all have heard me say this time and time again. Njoku's currently higher, lower 45.5 receiving yards. Nick Chubb, higher, lower 56.5 receiving yards. I know a lot of people are in on Sutton. Sutton, they have it higher, lower 61.5. But anyway, you can find all of this over on Underdog Fantasy. And you know what? F it. Let's go through and let's have some fun here. Mainly just because the only reason I'm doing this really is we saw that we have the 50% profit boost token. So we're going to apply that. Let's go ahead and let's put, you know what? What do we want on this? I want just, what can I root for to get $100? We'll go 16 to win 105. We need Njoku higher than 45.5 receiving yards. Sutton higher than 61.5 total yards. And Bo Nix higher than 221.5 passing yards. Is there any analysis in this? No, this is just for funsies. I saw that I had the 50% profit boost token, so your boy's going to take it. But of course, you want to check out any of those. You can find the link over on flockfantasy.com. I'm sorry, you can find the link in the live chat and the description. And promo code FLOCK will get you hooked up with that free Jameis Winston pick, more than less than half a total yard for tomorrow night. Sadly, I don't have that because I've been on Underdog for years. But if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, that should be available to you with the link. I'm not even going to leave it in the live chat. Go to the freaking description and comment section if you want that. But let's move back over here. Ooh, that was a struggle. But anyway, next game, we had the Colts and the Patriots. Very easy bounce back spot if you were just looking at what sportsbooks were saying with the Colts and the spread in this game. Jonathan Taylor was set up to crush. Obviously, we'll first start off with Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson coming into this game, you have the rushing upside, but not any passing volume. So really just a streamer. And yeah, Anthony Richardson, you get the rushing touchdown, the 48 rushing yards, you get a 2-point conversion. So you have 23 fantasy points, but at the end of the day, you only have 109 passing yards. So no receivers here are interesting whatsoever. Jonathan Taylor is the only running back to touch the football. So Taylor remains a must-start option. But again, not going to have a ton of check down appeal. And at the same time, Anthony Richardson is going to vulture touchdowns. So that does keep Jonathan Taylor from being that elite RB1. And instead, he is an RB2 that sees every snap in his backfield, which is very, very rare. Going over to the receivers, we are looking at Michael Pittman, maybe as the only guy you can look at. Obviously, Alec Pierce comes in with the receiving touchdown. But really, with downs out, I don't know. Pittman could be like the most desperation play possible. I'd say like, oh, in week 14, when you have a lot of bye weeks, maybe you play Pittman. But the Colts have a week 14 bye. Going over to the Patriots, Drake May still remains a viable streaming option based off the rushing upside that you have here. Get the 20 fantasy points. I ended up starting Ramondre Stevenson this week. I like the fact that the spread was close. Thought the Patriots possibly could have ran the ball. And yeah, you had 21 total opportunities for Ramondre. Frustrating thing is the touchdown's not there. That does go to Antonio Gibson. Gibson with the 7 opportunities. And then no receivers here are interesting whatsoever. And Hunter Henry obviously has been much better when you have Drake May under center. But the issue again with Hunter Henry is it's a low volume passing attack. And now you're getting some target volume going in the direction of Austin Hooper, where Hooper not only has 4 targets, but also comes away with a receiving touchdown. Now going over to Seattle and New York. Geno Smith coming into this game was just a streaming quarterback based off potential matchups. That's what he stays as. Going over to running back, you actually have Charbonnet vulturing a rushing touchdown here. Kenneth Walker, should be the worst game that we've had from Kenneth Walker all season. You get the 6.5 fantasy points. This is a season low. I mean, the frustrating thing is typically you had seen in games in which the Seahawks fall behind in a big time way, you actually have a considerable amount of targets going in the direction of Walker. The man does have a fumble, so that is going to be something to monitor because Charbonnet is a very effective running back. I probably put a little bit of caution on Walker going to the future. Obviously, I don't want to be panicking. Going over to the receivers, again, Tyler Lockett has been almost completely phased out. DK Metcalf got banged up a bit in the game, obviously is fine, but you do get 9 targets for Metcalf in comparison to 4 targets for JSN. So I still probably rank DK Metcalf like 1 to 2 slots higher than JSN in our rest of season rankings. But again, they are definitely very, very close. Where JSN, I believe this is the 4th straight game that he has actually led the Seattle Seahawks in total fantasy points. Now going over to tight end, nobody's interesting here, of course, in Seattle. Going over to the Jets, everything stays about the same. I'm sorry for telling everybody that Breece Hall was a must-start running back with him only getting you 6.5 fantasy points. Again, we saw this earlier in the season when everybody panicked about Breece against the Vikings, against the Broncos, with only 3 and 6 fantasy points. And then immediately after you get the 21-point bomb, the 26-point bomb, I don't know. Monitor the knee injury with Breece Hall. If he's healthy, I think he's going to be fine. Obviously, you do have some usage going over here to Braylon Allen. Isaiah Davis, you have some receiving volume where you get the little gimmicky flick touchdown at the goal line. But Breece is still very easily a running back 1 if healthy in my rest of season rankings. But health is going to be a major thing to monitor. Obviously, we want to be seeing the practice reports. Going over to the receivers, again, I mean, the thing is, it sucks. We keep on saying this is just a worse version of the Rams offense where you have to play both these guys. You have 12 and 10 targets going the direction of Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. Let's combine every receiver in this offense. Gibson, Corley, 3 targets. You look at Adams and Wilson with 22. So Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson see 22 out of 25 potential targets at the wide receiver position. It's not like the tight ends take up a bunch here. It is the most concentrated offense in the NFL, maybe outside of the Rams, but honestly, maybe more concentrated than the Rams now that you actually have Demarcus Robinson consistently stealing these touchdowns. So the receivers in New York remain must-start options, even if Garrett Wilson has been disappointing. Now going over to Tennessee, Will Levis, probably not a starter next year, depending on the options that they have. Obviously, you never consider Levis here. What's very interesting is to see Spears only with 1 carry. Spears with nothing as a receiver. I mean, the thing is, this game is an absolute blowout from start to finish. So none of the running backs can do anything. I'm very sorry to the person that I told this morning that they had to bench Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but I'm sorry. I'm going to double down on this. For the love of God, do not start Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Calvin Ridley still leads his team in targets with 7. Actually, I apologize. I'm an idiot. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, this is the first week he leads the team in targets with 8. I just can't be excited about a 27-year-old journeyman receiver that's never been relevant. That while, yes, he's playing a lot of snaps, he's in one of the worst offenses in the league. If this is somebody that maybe had this role in KC, then sure, I'd buy into it. But realistically, are you buying into a 27-year-old breakout with Will Levis under center? This is just freaking Trey Tucker all over again. It's cool that the man has had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 touchdowns in the last 8 weeks. But the target volume's not there, and it's a garbage offense. He's going to regress. Don't fall for this. Don't start this dude. I apologize if I told you not to start him today and he dropped 21 fantasy points, but we doubled down on it. No tight ends are interesting here in Tennessee, of course. Going over to Washington, Jaden Daniels remains a must-start quarterback. That was a very easy call. Obviously, people were panicking when Daniels had a couple down weeks with injured ribs in tough matchups. Now, over the past 2 weeks, Daniels averaging 30 points per game. I'm going through and looking at the running back usage. I don't want to go, oh, Brian Robinson had this many opportunities. Chris Rodriguez had this many. Jeremy Nichols, it was a blowout, right? Obviously, Eckler on the IR at this point. I mean, Brian Robinson is going to be an absolute must-start running back every single week going to the future. Terry McLaurin, a must-start wide receiver. Nobody else is interesting at wide receiver. Zach Ertz, still very much a streaming tight end that you can be excited about. Now, going over to Tampa and Carolina. This is maybe the number one game to have real takeaways and real updated rankings from. Not on the Baker end. Baker still remains just a quarterback that is maybe slightly better than the streamers, but like the thing is, you look at Baker versus Tua. How much does it matter? Now, going over to what we have with the running backs. This is what matters here. Previously, last week, we had seen Bucky Irving take over and essentially be the 60% back to Rachaad White at 40%. It was the first time that we had seen that all season. Typically, you were seeing rookies come on strong at the end of the year that showed efficiency early on as they phase out the veterans who have been inefficient up until this point. And Bucky Irving is 100% that running back that has dominated all season over Rachaad White from almost any efficiency metric that you could look at. This was a great matchup. Previous to this, I was viewing Bucky Irving still as a running back that was in a running back by committee. But at this point, you get 28 opportunities. So after the 28 opportunity performance, with their guaranteed receiving usage as well in what should be a decent offense, and now you have another phenomenal matchup against the Raiders this week, Bucky Irving very much looks like he can be an RB1 rest of season. And yeah, I mean, this is the first game that you've seen the 20-plus opportunities. This is the second game this season you've seen the 20-plus fantasy points. But I mean, it makes sense. You go through and you look at Rachaad White. Well, yeah, White comes through with the good efficiency performance in this matchup. I mean, almost any other game that you look at, Rachaad White had been giving them the least with the majority of this backfield. So Bucky, locked and loaded, must start running back every single week going into the future. The question is, how high do you rank him? I think you can make an argument to have him as that low-end RB1 or a high-end RB2, up to you. Now, going over to receivers, nothing to discuss. Evans, highlight grab right at the beginning of the game, looked phenomenal. Evans was a top 10 wide receiver for us coming into the week. He remains a top 10 wide receiver for us coming out of the week. Cade Otton sees 7 targets out of a total of 33 Baker Mayfield pass attempts. Cade Otton's still in the range of just like whatever tight ends that you probably end up starting every week because like can't freaking start any players like Kyle Pitts. Going over to quarterback, I know everybody is losing their mind with Bryce Young looking like a good quarterback over the past 2 weeks. I've seen people saying that Bryce Young looks like a franchise quarterback since coming back from his benching. Do you ever consider putting this guy into your starting lineup for fantasy football purposes? No. Never. Never, ever, 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 ever. Maybe if he gives you 3 to 4 more games with 20-plus fantasy points. But the fact of the matter is, well, yes, he does have the rushing touchdown today. This dude has no rushing upside. It's still probably a pretty bad offense. Now, obviously, I interviewed this dude at the draft. I'm rooting for him. I would love to be able to see him turn into the next Tom Brady, and I can have a picture next to him and show off everybody and brag. But reality, well, he's had 2 strong games. Let's not overlook the 20 horrendous performances Bryce Young's had through his career. Going over to running back, Chuba Hubbard loses a fumble. Chuba Hubbard is completely removed as a receiver. So it's only taken me saying it every single week for the past month. Literally, we've said this every single week for the past month. Oh, Jonathan Brooks is going to be coming in, and Jonathan Brooks is going to take the third down role, going to have usage as a receiver, and you can't start Chuba Hubbard in the Carolina Panthers offense and a running back by committee. Last week, Chuba Hubbard said, F you. He gave me the finger. And Chuba Hubbard dropped the 15 fantasy points against the Kansas City Chiefs in an absolute brutal matchup. He played 89% of the snaps the first week that you had Jonathan Brooks in here. And set, I want to say, not only a season high, but that had to have been a career high for Chuba Hubbard, right? Yeah, last week against the Chiefs, he sets a career high with the amount of snaps that he plays. Well, it finally comes through. Jonathan Brooks has 9 opportunities in comparison to Hubbard at 12. Brooks is the guy with the receiving usage. Now, am I coming through and screaming, oh my gosh, now Jonathan Brooks is a must-start option? No. The entire reason, the entire thing we were talking about freaking with Chuba Hubbard in the first place is you just don't want to start a committee running back in Carolina. Yeah, this is a committee back. Jonathan Brooks is a committee back. I don't want to start either of these dudes. Pretty much like premium handcuff running backs for the other guy. Brooks goes down, Hubbard's a must-start name. If Hubbard goes down, Brooks is a must-start name. Going over to the receivers, I'm honestly kind of surprised. If you started David Moore, I want to tell you something. You made a horrendous call. If you picked up David Moore, if you picked up a 29-year-old wide receiver for Bryce Young because he had a 20-point game against the Kansas City Chiefs, when I want to say, is this his first 20-point game of his entire NFL career? Maybe. Yes. Let me just be on the record. I know I'm just being an ass right now for no reason. Actually, this was his second 20-point game. He had one back in 2018. If you started David Moore, if you even picked this dude up off the waiver wire, and you started him this week, you got so freaking lucky to get 9 points. For you to start a wide receiver that has had one 20-point performance, is 29 years old, and a horrible offense, don't know what you were thinking. Don't know what you were smoking. It worked out for you, though. You got 9 points. Better than I would have assumed. Had 9 targets. You have 10 targets for Thielen. You have 8 targets for Leggett, 9 targets for David Moore, and 8 targets for Tommy Tremble. I am sorry to be a hater, and maybe that's what I'm being here. But if you were telling me that these 3 to 4 players are going to equally split the target distribution in a Bryce Young offense, I don't think you can start any receivers in Carolina. Obviously, it's a great game for Adam Thielen. He hits the gritty. It looks like a lot of fun. This is probably the second best game of Bryce Young's NFL career, if not the best game. And if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, you should definitely be excited because Bryce Young's probably your quarterback next season, and it looks a lot more promising today than it did a month ago. But if I was submitting my starting lineup in week 14, unless I'm decimated by injuries, I'm not putting any of these guys into my lineup. Now, going over to the Rams, I started Stafford this week. You had this as the second highest game in terms of the over-under of the week. I watched literally 0 of this Rams game. I was on the flight. The game that they had on the flight was the Eagles-Ravens. So I didn't watch anything here. I saw at the very beginning of the game, they were getting a lot of Blake Corum action. It looked like they abandoned that and went over to Kyren Williams when they realized, you know what? Kyron's probably the better back. But based off what I'm seeing here, I don't think much changes. Please correct me if I'm wrong here. Like I said, I watched literally 0 snaps of this game. I was on the plane and this wasn't an option for me. Stafford's still a streamer. Kyron's still a must-start running back every single week. Puka, Kupp, still must-start wide receivers every week. I'm assuming Kupp didn't get injured. Yeah. Kupp just gives you a dud, but not much else to it. No way in hell I'm ever starting DeMarcus Robinson or Tutu Atwell, even though DeMarcus Robinson has been a freaking pain with these touchdowns, where the man is sitting with 6 total touchdowns over the last 6 weeks, effectively just vulturing Puka and Kupp at wide receiver. And going down to tight end, I'm not looking at anybody here. Going over to New Orleans, Taysom Hill, done for the year. So now you have no Olave. You have no Shaheed. You have no Taysom. You have no way to move the ball down the field. You can never consider starting Derek Carr, regardless of how good the matchup is. Kamara is guaranteed every single week to see 20-plus opportunities. He had 29 opportunities this week, 20 the week prior, 23 the week before, 37 against Carolina, 21 against the Chargers, 14 against Denver, the one bad week. But outside of that, Kamara guaranteed to get the 20-plus opportunities, gets you the receiving usage, so you got to start the dude. Going over to the receivers, I'm not interested in any of these guys. I know people are going to run over for MVS. MVS, 3 straight games with double-digit points, but also 4 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks. You actually look at the target volume underlying this. You've had 10 targets over the past 3 weeks. I'm sorry if I've told you to bench MVS in the live streams, but I stand by it. Stand by it. Now, going over to the game I actually did watch. This is Philly-Baltimore. Hurts, Lamar, both must-start quarterbacks before and after this game. Barkley, Henry still must-start running backs before and after this game. A.J. Brown must-start wide receiver before and after this game. Dallas Goedert still an exciting play when you have no Devonta Smith, but I think, or at least I'm hoping we get Devonta Smith back in Week 14. Smith coming back in Week 14 will make Jalen Hurts even that much more appealing. I mean, you only have 118 passing yards here for Jalen Hurts in this offense, but really, I mean, they were just able to run the ball over and over and over and over again in the second half. And then going over to what we have with the Ravens receivers, Zay Flowers, you get the 7 targets out of a total of what? 11 targets. Obviously, if you have anybody in this offense not named Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, or Lamar Jackson, I would cut him. Likely comes through and maybe it helps out some underdog best ball teams, but in reality, there's no way I'm starting Likely going into the future. I know he has 8 targets, gets the receiving touchdown late. I mean, but it was completely meaningless. I mean, ultimately, if you are looking at Isaiah Likely, this tight end where we have now had 3 games with double-digit fantasy points, whereas Andrews has actually been pretty consistent. Obviously, Andrews was horrendous through the first 5 weeks, but Andrews looking like a tight end 1 rest of season relatively easily. The pain is obviously with these guys in Baltimore, you're having to deal with the Week 14 bye. Now, going over to the Niners-Bills game, I watched the first 2.5 quarters. I think we had to stop watching near the end of the third quarter. So, if anything happened in the fourth, I missed it. Thank the heavens I decided to bench Brock Purdy this week. It was a clear spot to kind of, I thought you avoided everybody in San Francisco outside of CMC and Kittle. You were looking at sportsbooks projecting out the Niners to be a bottom 5 offense in the league with the offensive line injuries and the bad weather in this game in Buffalo. Purdy craps the bed. I'm considering dropping Brock Purdy, depending on the injury news that we have with this Niners offense going into this next week. Like, I think some of the other streaming quarterbacks that are available in my league, like Anthony Richardson at this point, I think I would have to consider over Purdy. Running back, CMC was cooking. I was ready to come on here and go, ha, ha, ha. I told y'all CMC is going to be good. Hot take. But then, this is the news that drops. Let me move this over. And I'm reading this for the first time. I started streaming about 40 minutes ago. This came out 39 minutes ago. McCaffrey suffered a PCL injury in Sunday's 35-10 loss to the Bills that may be season-ending. Making only his 4th appearance after missing 8 games due to the Achilles tendonitis, McCaffrey was injured in the first half against the Bills and may not return again this season. The star running back will likely undergo further testing on the injury to confirm the initial diagnosis, but it appears Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerendo may be relied upon to lead the Niners backfield the rest of the way if they can climb into the playoff picture, yada, 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 yada. The Niners are cooked. There's no way around it. CMC is cooked. There's no way around it. Isaac Guerendo gets you a rushing touchdown. Jordan Mason has the 13 carries. For me, if I was a betting man, if I had to pick a running back between the two, I'm going to go with Jordan Mason. I'm going to go with the running back where you had the workload through the first month of the season, where he did look very strong. But again, now if they're splitting this backfield, you can't have Jordan Mason splitting the role with Isaac Guerrero and then Mason's the running back that he was previously. As you look through the first month, 75%, 75%, 81% of the snaps. If that's not the case, then I don't know. You can roll the dice with Isaac Guerrero if you really wanted to. But I think it's probably a committee here in San Francisco where I don't think Jordan Mason's getting up to those same snap rates in that same role that you had earlier. Going over to the receivers, nobody was interesting as a start based off the projections he had with this offense coming into the week. Nobody comes through. I have Ricky Pearsall in the Flock League. I'm going to drop this dude. I need to figure out if there's anybody on the waiver wire who could I potentially pick up. I guess maybe I could look at Chris Rodriguez. The thing is with Rodriguez, the only way I'm ever starting him is if Brian Robinson goes down. I don't want Hassan Haskins. Why the hell are people picking up Hassan Haskins? So yeah, I can drop Pearsall, but who the hell do I pick up? Anyway, let's go back over to the game. Going over to tight ends. I'm sorry. I thought Kittle was a must-start tight end regardless of what the weather was. Kittle, you have 1.7. I still think Kittle is a top 5 tight end rest of the season very easily. I think Kittle's still on the Mount Rushmore. Going over to what we have at quarterback, Josh Allen was a top 3 quarterback coming into this game, remains the top 3 quarterback coming out of it. James Cook remained a must-start running back coming into this game, remains a must-start running back coming out of it. I mean, really, you don't have a ton of completions here for Josh Allen. So the lack of receiving usage for Cook, not a concern whatsoever. Obviously, this is a game where, I mean, you just have each team running the ball every chance they get. I mean, the Niners were getting blown out, but given the weather in this contest, I mean, the running backs total what? 1, 14, 18, 20, 25 carries in comparison to Brock Purdy with 18 pass attempts. So, again, looking at like just the overall game environment, super weird game with the weather. I will say, as a side note, it was so freaking annoying to just hear the announcers every single play. And I mean, every single play. They were going, oh, well, the snow has this impact. Oh, the snow. 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 I agree. I like the snow games. They're cool to watch. But I can see the snow on my TV. You don't have to remind me that there's snow on the field every 10 seconds. But I think that should be it for all the updates with the games that happened today. Obviously, there were some games that happened yesterday, but not yesterday, Friday and Thursday. But we already talked about those. Again, like I said, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to watch the Chiefs-Raiders game, so couldn't dive too much into that. But let me go ahead and remind y'all, we just went through and took our own underdog pick'em because I had a 50% profit boost token with my app. I would probably look to see if I were y'all, I'd look to see if you have 50% profit boost token on Underdog. Because Underdog did just drop a ridiculous amount of promos specifically for what, I don't know what the hell everybody's calling it. Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I have no idea. But all I know is I had a 50% profit boost token. And if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, you can get a free Jameis Winston pick on top of that. More than less than half a total yard with the link in the description, comment section. Promo code FLOCK will get you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you'll get that free pick and a free team review in the live stream we're doing every night. I think the pick that most people would probably be excited about here would be Sutton to have higher than 61.5 receiving yards. Where obviously Sutton has just been absolutely crushing this. Where, I mean, the man has, over the past 5 weeks straight, I believe, hit that mark. But, again, there's very little analysis going into that. That's more so to have fun. But, much love, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all will get to see if I won this week with the Flock League video coming out on Tuesday. Come on. You think I'm going to lose? You think I'm not going to get a bye? Kidding me? Your boy may have a bye week in the fantasy football playoffs and not much closer to being a champion, but really appreciate you. Really hope that you're able to win this week and really hope I get to see you out with the live stream tomorrow.